We head to the phones, visit with him a little bit earlier than normal today. It's Matt Mackowiak, GOP political strategist. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Chad. Doing great.
Good. Appreciate you joining us today. Let's start off. I want to look at some Texas politics, and this goes back to last week, and House Speaker Joe Straus, this bathroom bill issue, even though the legislature's not meeting, it appears as though this is still going to be a campaign issue going into this upcoming year, and Speaker Straus is formulating a business climate panel, basically to be more pro-business. He wants Republicans to get away from bathroom bill type issues and be more pro-business, in his opinion. What do we know about this, and what does it mean for 2018 moving forward?
Yeah, look, I think it's clear that Speaker Straus remains very concerned about the potential for a bathroom bill to come back next session, and certainly for it to be used as, a political weapon against some of his incumbent members in primaries in this election cycle. And so, I don't think this was specifically set up just to combat a future bathroom bill. I think it was broader than that, but I think that's one of the things it will do. There was a lot of disagreement between the House and the Senate last session on whether the bathroom bill really would affect the Texas economy or not. There were rival studies going back and forth, kind of statements made about what the effect was in North Carolina, which is something I know the Lieutenant Governor feels was really not consequential at all, based on his conversations with the then sitting Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina. So, look, these interim charges are not unusual. This is something that the House and Senate do.
Yeah.
A lot of people probably think that members of the legislature don't do anything in between regular sessions. It's really not true. They're still in Austin maybe a day a week, maybe a day every other week, depending on what committees are on, what interim charges they're considering. And so this will be one of them. They'll look at the overall business climate in Texas. There's been some concern. The Amazon headquarters story is one that's been kicking around, where the so-called business climate in Texas is perhaps a significant consideration that they're looking at when they look at the states that they're considering.
Interesting. So my question is basically, who's more out of touch or in touch with the average Republican voter in the state? Is it Straus right now on this issue and some of the other fights that we saw in the House, or is it Abbott and Patrick who've been more aligned and are more well known in the state?
Well, I think you said Republican voters. If you mean Republican primary voters, I don't have a lot of doubt that Abbott and Patrick are better positioned to deliver a message to those voters with credibility in a way that will resonate than Speaker Straus will. People oftentimes confuse the position of Speaker of the House with another statewide office like Lieutenant Governor. It's a different thing. I mean, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, everything, all those are all statewide offices that are elected by statewide electorates. That is not the case for Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House is first elected by his Texas House district, and then he's elected by the members. And so they have a different consideration and a different platform, perhaps, than the statewide officials do. But look, this is one of the key questions. Is the Speaker has aligned himself with public education advocates, with opponents of the bathroom bill, on some of these issues that might be better positions in general elections, but I don't know that they're good positions in primary elections. So this is going to be a very interesting primary season in Texas, where you're going to see 25 or 30 Republican challengers in House races try to prosecute the case against Straus and against his leadership team. And I think that's a case that hardcore Republican primary voters, might be willing to buy. But the question is going to be, how large is turnout, and is the Straus team able to broaden out the primary electorate in a way that brings more mainstream Republicans into the primary? That is a difficult and expensive proposition, but it is something perhaps that they can do with enough resources, and if they run good enough campaigns.
Let's switch it over to some national politics. I believe the president and Mitch McConnell are set to meet today. Some say that will be maybe an awkward meeting from depending on what all they get into. What would you like to see if you were able to be there and have those two talk? What would you like to have them talk about and get ironed out?
That's a great question, Chad. And apparently this meeting, I think, came about because the president picked up the phone and called McConnell on Saturday. They hadn't talked in some time. Keep in mind, they're not at war over everything. They are working together on some significant things, judicial nominations being one of them. Obviously, they're working together on tax reform. They're going to work together on disaster relief for Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico. So there's a lot they need to discuss. They also need to discuss the budget. The budget has passed the House. It has to pass the Senate this week, or they could lose the opportunity to tax reform this year. So the Senate is dealing with a serious deadline. I think they will pass the budget. But look, they need to get on the same page. And, I think McConnell is pretty uncomfortable with some of the things that Trump has said and done, particularly going after members of the U.S. Senate, incumbent members of the Senate. All this, what I would consider irresponsible talk from Steve Bannon about targeting Republicans rather than targeting Democrats. In an election cycle, you have 10 incumbent Democratic senators from running from states that Trump won. That's the best way to move Trump's agenda starting next January. Would be to increase the number of Republicans from 52 to 56 or 58 to get you closer to that 60-vote threshold that you're going to need on most everything. So, look, they need to be on the same page. They're going to try to figure out how to land the plane before the end of this calendar year, see how much can get done. My sense is McConnell is going to tell the president that the tax reform probably cannot pass this year. It can pass early next year. But they've really, again, got to get perfectly aligned here. And I think that there is a bit of distrust right now between those two individuals, and that is not a healthy thing.
The president's moves on Iran and the Iranian deal, good? Was that a good move or a bad move?
So I actually think this one's more complicated than maybe we all realize. I think you could make a case in both directions. The reason I think it's a good step, just probably narrowly, is it does isolate Iran. It does give the U.S. new leverage because they haven't fully pulled out of the deal. Although all the president has done is decertified it. It now kicks back to Congress. Now Congress is going to have to decide whether they want to reapply sanctions just from the United States. You're probably not going to get sanctions from the European partners to the deal. They've now begun sort of restarting economic negotiations and partnerships with Iran. But look, this is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. They've been violating the deal. People who say they're not violating the deal, I think, are not being realistic. The ballistic missile tests in and of themselves is a violation of the deal. So, look, I don't know where this goes from here. I think the United States, if you saw Rex Tillerson or Nikki Haley over the weekend, they made clear that they're not pulling out right now. They're trying to deal with a couple aspects of the Iran deal that Trump hates. The sunset period, which basically lets Iran build nuclear weapons with no penalty in 7 years, and some of the other unrelated issues, their sponsorship of terrorism and other things. So it's a very complicated question because you're not going to be able to put the sanctions back on if the European partners aren't willing to accede to that, and it seems like they're not. So I think it was a bit of a frustration for Trump that he felt sort of jammed on it. He felt like he couldn't do what he wanted, and he didn't want to recertify a deal he didn't think that they were upholding, and a deal that he didn't agree with in the first place.
I don't disagree with a couple of the moves the president has done, which is kicking the Iranian deal to Congress and kicking the DACA decision, to Congress. It should be there. But does the president run a risk of running out of time legislatively? Before 2018, where they still got to get tax cuts done, they've got to get they've got to get so much done before the end of the year, and now they've got these 60-day deadlines set up by the president on DACA and on Iran. I don't see where they have the time to finish all this stuff, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's another great question. And my understanding is the DACA deadline is not till March 5th, and he told a U.S. Senator from Oklahoma named James Langford that he would extend it if they do get past the deadline. So I think Congress feels like they have a little bit more time on DACA, maybe than they think they do, and they need to find a bipartisan compromise there, obviously. And the contours of one that would increase border security or funding for the wall in a significant way, while allowing DACA recipients to stay in the country legally, would probably be a pretty good deal. Whether that can get cut, I don't know. But you're right. The Iran deal, I think, now does trigger a 60-day period. Look, I think that's part of what appeals to Trump about this is he sees Congress doing nothing. And so what he's basically, it's like having a kid at the dinner table refusing to eat your dinner, and he's putting more food on their plate, right? You're not going to eat, I'm going to keep giving you more food, basically. And that's what he's doing to Congress. He's saying, look, you guys are dysfunctional. You've done almost nothing this year. Certainly the Senate hasn't. I'm now going to try to screw up your entire holiday until you guys, stop blocking things and start getting to work. And I think that's part of what he's doing. We'll see where it goes from here. I mean, the holiday period is generally a time where a lot of things get done because members of Congress want to be home with their families for holidays, and that deadline does tend to focus the body in a way that the general sort of legislative periods don't.
Matt, tell folks how they can sign up for the Must Read Texas morning email, and then also what your latest podcast is all about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We do a morning news brief every weekday that's you can find at mustreadtexas.com. We pull all the top news from around the state into one place and deliver it to your inbox. I have a podcast that's taping today with Josh Green, who wrote a biography of Steve Bannon, which has been a New York Times bestseller. That should post hopefully tonight or tomorrow morning. You can find that at the podcast is called Mac on Politics. You can find it in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and on the web at mackonpolitics.com.
All right, very good. Matt Mackowiak, as always, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chad. Have a great week. Take care.
You too. That's Matt Mackowiak. You can follow him on Twitter as well, at Matt Mackowiak.